Welcome back to the Gardening with Joy and Hollly radio show. Happy that you've chose us to spend a little time together. Hollly, let's go to the hotline and bring in our guest for today.
Yeah, Karn Hugg is an avid gardener, author, designer, and a firm believer that plants can help relieve stress. Plants are her passion, and words are the tools she uses to sing their praises. Welcome to the program, Karn.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Well, we appreciate you taking time out of your day, not only to educate Hollly and myself, but all of our listeners. And I'll start with this. How did you get into the world of gardening and the world of plants? Was it a thing you grew up with, or was there an aha moment that you discovered this later on in life?
Yeah, that's a good question. Yeah, no, I did not grow up with it per se. I was a city girl who grew up in Chicago, and outside of my mom growing a few tomato plants, I didn't really have much exposure to gardening at all. It wasn't until I was in Seattle as an adult, working at a tech job, completely stressed out. But I had a little house with a little backyard, and I started planting flowers. And there was sort of a definite transition that happened because there was a catalog. It must have been like the Burpee catalog or something like that, where I was looking at, the plants that you can buy and plant, and I saw a butterfly bush. And on a little description, it said, attract butterflies to your garden. And that was kind of an aha moment where I thought, because I didn't know anything about butterflies. I just thought butterflies flew around and came and went as they pleased, and there was no rhyme or reason to it, And I thought, well, I want to attract butterflies to my garden. And so I ended up going to the nursery, a different nursery, and buying a butterfly bush and planting it. And sure enough, a butterfly came later that season, and I was hooked. I just thought, oh my God, nature is so cool. And I wanted to do that again. And I realized that tending to that butterfly bush made me really happy. And after a long, stressful day, I was able to go out and work in the garden, and all my stress just sort of melted away.
And with guests we've had on for 8 years now, we hear that type of story over and over again. They were in a high-stress job, and then they found gardening, and that was their decompression avenue, and it changed their whole life and how they operate.
Yeah, no doubt. I believe it. Yeah.
Now, in your process of learning the butterfly bush and the gardening aspect, was this prior to the invention of the World Wide Web, where you couldn't just at a moment's notice pick up a $1,500 piece of technology in your hand and go, what is this and how do I do that?
Yeah, right. I didn't even think of that, but yeah, you're right. This was like in the maybe mid-late 90s. That this happened. So there was kind of the internet, but not in the way we think of it. I was reading magazines and books, and I would buy books and go to the library and just read every magazine I could about plants. That was kind of my solace every night in bed, is that's kind of what helped me calm down and relax me enough to go to sleep. Yeah.
Awesome. So let's talk about plants and stress relief. How do plants help with stress and, not just, reading about them, but how do plants help with stress?
Yeah, sure. There's several ways. Obviously the first way is, when you get out in the garden, there's exercise. And of course that, gets your blood flowing and helps in all different kinds of ways. And when you're out in the garden, of course, you get vitamin D into your eyes, and that helps you sleep better, and that just helps your immune system and, just the fresh air in general. But the actual studies are really fascinating. The Japanese are really sort of at the forefront of all of this research about how plants literally help us reduce stress. And, you may have heard the most famous study is the forest bathing study, where researchers had very stressed out businessmen walk in a forest setting for a couple hours 3 times a week. And then they would take their blood pressure, heart rate, all this other stuff, blood samples, and they found that those walks lowered their blood pressure enormously. And not only that, but it boosted their cancer fighting cells, the kinds of cells that we have that actually fight off cancer. So, and what he discovered, what those researchers discovered was it was the scents of the hinoki cypress trees and how that helped, got into the body and helped. I mean, I'm not a scientist, so I don't know exactly the connections, but they narrowed it down to the scents of the trees. So that's one way, but there's also other studies. We know about patients who have been in hospitals who had a view of trees, and a view of a brick wall. And the patients, I think they were recovering from gallbladder surgery, and they found that those patients recovered more quickly and with fewer complications when they had a view of nature, greenery outside of their window. And then also just generally speaking, like plants grow in fractal patterns, right? So they divide and they subdivide and they subdivide. Like if you look at a leaf, you see the veination and how that subdivides. Well, those fractal patterns are very harmonious with our eyes, with the human eye. So it's like this natural harmonious connection for us to see a plant. We automatically relax when we see those patterns, which is also an argument for houseplants. There was a study in Korea, I think it was Korea or Taiwan, where they put plants in a room with students, and they found that the students performed better with plants in the room in terms of exams, reporting less anxiety, less stress, and general overall feelings of happiness. And they also found that in these studies, the plants didn't even have to be directly in front of them. They could be in their peripheral vision, which I thought was fascinating. So there's that. There was a study about patients who or subjects who looked at a bouquet of roses, and they found that those subjects who looked at roses reduced their nervous activity their stress by 25%, and it raised their relaxation activity by 29%. So even just looking at a bouquet of roses helps reduce your stress. So, there's more and more studies, and just overall, the science is so compelling. It's great.
Well, and Hollly, you can speak on this. We have some property in the Northwoods, Wisconsin, and there's a certain level of relaxation that we are able to obtain when going there that you can't get really in any other form or fashion. When you get in the woods and you sit there and you just listen, and it's so quiet, it hurts your ears to a certain degree of that you can't get anywhere else.
Yeah, that reminds me of another study where they looked, this was in Europe, I want to say it was like in Denmark or maybe somewhere in Scandinavia, where they looked at people who had views of buildings outside their window versus people who had views of greenery outside their window. And they found less depression in those people who had the view of greenery. So it really does just help to instantly relax you,
Definitely. So tell us more about your book, Leave Your Troubles Behind, How to De-Stress and Grow Happiness Through Plants. Maybe a little snippet or something to pique our listeners' interest to go pick up a copy and what the book is about.
Yeah, sure. So the book's, the origins of the book are, I was a gardener for almost 20 years, and every time I would, design a garden for someone or maintain that garden, they often told me that the garden was their happy place and their relaxation, like sanctuary. And I started thinking like, could people who didn't have a garden kind of get like the effects of plants into their lives? And so I started studying it, and I found that through my research on happiness, there's several activities that boost happiness, and that's learning, experiencing life mindfully, being idle and playing, supporting another life, uniting like minds, recognizing what you have with gratitude, and exercising. And so what I also found is that if you do any of those activities in nature, your stress lowers even more quickly, and you become happier even more quickly. So it's kind of, and by the way, those activities, learning, experiencing, idle, supporting, uniting, recognizing, and exercising, add up to the acronym leisure, which is really what it's about. It's about not working so hard, learning how to relax, learning how to just spend time in nature to make that switch more instantly. Like I said, where you are stressed out, and you can switch into a more relaxed mode more quickly if you do any of those activities among plants or the outdoors. Right. So,
right.
Yeah.
You are a master pruner. First of all, what is that, and what is the certification's importance of such a title?
Yeah, a master pruner is just kind of like a master gardener. And in the Seattle area where I live, I went through a program where you just learn how to properly prune trees and shrubs, learn how to prune, cane shrubs, and just learn how trees grow and learn how shrubs grow and how their vascular systems work, etc. It's important to have that certification, because if you cut a tree in an incorrect place, you can leave a stub, and that stub can allow disease to come in. The cool thing about trees is they have these little hormones at their branch collars, like where the branches meet the trunk, or the branches meet each other. And if you cut a tree at the branch collar will release their little hormones, which is a signal for the tree to close up its wound. So if you prune a tree correctly, you're not really doing much damage to it. But let's say if you top a tree and you just cut off the top, like a conifer, you're making a flat surface in its vascular system. And when the rain comes down, it will get into that vascular system and the tree will rot. And then it will weaken and it can die, because it doesn't have the capacity for those hormones to heal its wound. So,
very interesting.
Did that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah. I was like, what? I was like, I didn't even know being a master pruner was a thing. And then I looked into it, and I was like, that's very interesting, because you don't think about these things. You, as a gardener, sometimes you just prune stuff or whatever.
You just do it to do it, and then you walk away. Okay, it'll be fine, and move on.
Right. And really, like I said, the two, the most damaging things you can do to a tree or a shrub is to leave that stub and not cut it where it branches off. Because if you cut it where it branches off, then it'll get the signal to close that wound. But if you cut it and there's a little stub, that stub will decay, but it'll be hard for the tree to close up its wound, because it can't mold, it can't form scar, basically.
So as we are in fall, what are some of your favorite fall tips for gardeners?
Oh, sure. Yes. And I was just doing one of these today, actually. And by the way, I have written an article, which I can put on social media as a gift for people after I talk about this, if they want to look more closely into it. But my tips are, if you have a tree that has diseased leaves, and you can tell they're diseased, like they have black spots, they have little, bumps on them or whatnot, I would rake up those diseased leaves or diseased seed pods, whatever, and dispose of them. So the rain or snow over the winter doesn't spread the spores of those diseases. So that's one thing. I would pull weeds that set seed in fall, like chickweed, hairy bittercress, ragweed, just to stave off the spread of weeds. I would prune off dead branches from a tree so they don't split and create a wound, like we were just talking about, over winter. And I'd mulch or fill in the bare spots in your yard with ground covers, or just, bark or bark chips, so that you don't have muddy open areas where weeds can sprout and go nuts, which I've had happen plenty in my time. A couple last ones: overseed your lawn, especially the bare areas, again, that can kind of turn into mud, and cover your spigots with foam covers or towels, and put your hoses in the garage. Because I've learned that the hard way too, where I didn't put a hose in the garage. I go to turn it on next spring, and then it just sprouts water from the the connection because it froze. Yeah, and which is a big one in the Midwest.
Right, and hoses aren't cheap.
No, exactly. Right.
Well, Karen, we greatly appreciate the information you've educated Hollly and myself on, and all our listeners. How can people find out more about you? How can they get your books? Where can they find you on the World Wide Web?
Thank you. Yeah. So my website is, KarenHugg.com. That's KarenHugg, like Hugg with 2Gs.com. And I have lots of articles on there about plants and how they lower our stress. I also have design advice. I have plant advice on there. It's all free and available to everyone. You don't have to, there's no pay portal or anything like that. And then on social media, I'm mostly on Threads, the new social media platform, and I'm on Instagram a little bit, but I'm on Threads almost daily, posting tips about gardening, just kind of what's going on in my own garden. And I like to post good environmental news because I like to spread the good news about the people who are working hard to help our planet. So.
Well, there you go. Well, Karen, again, thank you so much for the time and the education for Hollly and myself and all of our listeners. We greatly thank you for that.
Well, thanks for having me, and you guys have a great fall.
Absolutely.